All right, so now that we have our basic tools under our belt, we're going to continue and grow these skills, but we're going to take a look at how we can start properly creating models, working from image planes and working to scale. So in the resource pack, I have a couple concepts for you to follow, and we're going to take a look at these. The first one we're going to tackle is the desk here, and you can see the desk has dimensions to it, and as an image we can follow. Now with the jar, I just had you freehand it, but with the desk, we're going to go ahead and utilize this as an image plane, which allows us to essentially trace our object. I'm going to add this to my PureRef document, just so I have it on hand to talk about. And we'll start a fresh scene and get this set up. So to begin with, let's go to File, New Scene, to create a fresh scene here. And let's go ahead and load in our reference images to our project file. So I have this file floating here. We're going to come over here to our Section 5 project, into Source Images, into Props here, and we can create a new folder in here, and I'm just going to name this Desk. And then inside of the desk, I like to create a subfolder here, and we'll go ahead and make this our reference. From there, we can just drag Desk into there, so we'll have access to that. Now, coming into Maya, we can set up our file so we're ready to work in the proper units. If we take a look at this, you'll see that it is currently working in inches, and the default unit inside of Maya is in centimeters. So we're going to want to switch over to this. It's important that we work in real-world units inside of 3D to ensure everything fits together in the end. And I believe we may have discussed this in a previous section, but now that we're creating a larger production that's going to have multiple working elements that all need to look correct in the scene, we're really going to want to pay attention to this. With something like the jar, we can always scale that later as long as it has the right proportions. And the things about jars is they come in all shapes and sizes. But with things like furniture, they are designed based on humans, and therefore they have certain dimensions that are standard with some variation, but in general, they'll be about the same size. So we want to make sure we get that right. So how do we switch units inside of Maya? We're going to come up here into the Windows menu, and inside of the Windows menu, there's a section here called Settings and Preferences and Preferences. And this allows us to change the various preferences inside of Maya. If you go ahead and access this, we can come into the section here called Settings. And in Settings, you'll see that we have working units. We have linear and angular. Linear is our measurement, and we're just going to switch this over to inch. That way it matches our concept. Notice the grid in the background shifted. The grid represents a single unit of the measurement. So one grid is going to be equal to 1 inch is the idea. So let's go ahead and click Save, and we can get that put in place. Now, another really useful thing to be aware of is if you create a polygon cube, this is a 1 by 1 by 1 object, meaning that by default, this cube is 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. So in all directions, it's 1 inch. With scale being a multiplier, we can use scale to block in the overall size and proportions of our object. So if I go ahead and take a look at this, the overall width of this is going to be 55 inches. So I can hit my scale tool, and in X, make sure the side to side axes, we're going to set this to 55 inches. We always want to be modeling with Z forward, so we want to make sure we get that right. Now the next one is the height, which is 36. So I'm going to want to go ahead and bring that up to 36 in Y. And then the depth is going to be 15.5. So I'll go ahead and put in 15.5. And this is going to give us a block out of the scale of this object. I can then hit D and V to snap to vertex, to snap to the base, hit D again to exit, go to move, and X to snap to grid, and just snap that to be on the bottom there. Now, this is going to act as our block-in cube or modeling bounds. In other words, the size of the object we're making. Whenever I make a model, I like to start with this to make sure I'm staying within the blueprint, if that makes sense. So when this is placed into a scene, or if we're talking about a video game, a level, we know it's going to take up the proper amount of space. We're not going to be above or underneath it. So I'm going to double click and just name this bounds, and then I'm going to create a layer with this attached, and I'll just go ahead and make this our modeling bounds, and save, and then we can set this to a template, which just gives us a wireframe. Now, once we have that set, we're ready to bring in our image plane. The reason we wanted to have this set up first is so that we have something to scale our image plane to. So we can make sure that our image plane is the correct size relative to the scene. Without something to measure to, it's pretty much up to guessing, or we have to find some other way to measure it. So let's talk about how we can get this into here. The first thing I'm going to do is tap spacebar to access the quad split view, and we're going to input the image planes into their respective views. So in terms of this, I just have a front and a side view, and that should be enough because this is going to go against the wall, so we don't really know how the back looks. We don't really need to know the top all that much. But with the front view here, I'm going to tap spacebar to enter this. And to upload our image plane, we're going to come in here to the View menu, come down towards the bottom to Image Plane, and select Import Image. This will link to our source images folder. And remember, I saved this into Props, Desk, Reference, and then there is our reference, and we can hit Open. And this will bring this in. Now, what we can do is we can pair this with our X-ray tool here to see through this, and we can scale it so that the bounds of the desk are the same size as our box. So I'm going to go ahead and X-ray that. We're going to move this up here so that it is somewhat centered and sitting on the ground plane visually. And then I'm going to move this so that the midpoint is about in the middle of where this object's at. I can then hit D to move my pivot point and X to snap to the center there. And I'm going to just zoom out and scale this up. Now, something that can be useful is pairing this with wire on shaded, which is this icon right here. That just makes the wireframe a bit more apparent, but it's a little bit hard to see with that black background. But we're going to just zoom in here and just get that to the point where it's touching that as close as possible. And that looks pretty good in terms of matching up with our box, except for right there. Now, if you're having a hard time seeing this, which you might with that being set to black, you can select your image plane here and access the attribute editor to come in and edit its settings. So there's a lot of different settings you can edit in the attribute, but the one that I'm interested in is this one here called alpha gain. That's the transparency. If we go ahead and reduce this, it will make it transparent, and it will make it a little bit easier to see where that dark line of our box is versus the rest of it. So now that I have that in place, I'm just going to move this over so it's more centered. I can then hit D again and X to snap to grid and just scale it down to fit. And there we go. Now this is going to be an image plane that is perfectly the size of my box, and we'll be able to work with this a bit more easier. I can go ahead and increase this a bit if I don't want to have that level of transparency. And just remember, with the X-ray turned on, it does look different. Now that we have this one in place, what I will do is just kind of move it backwards. That way it's behind the object. We generally don't want to have it intersecting. It's best to have it behind. And I'm going to actually Control D to duplicate the image plane, so that way it retains its scale. Hit E to rotate, and just hold down J to rotate in increments till I get this to 90 degrees. Now, if you don't quite get it to 90, you can come into the channel box and set it, but I got it close enough. Now we're just going to tap space, come into the side view, and just match this up with the side here. I can turn on X-ray mode so I can see that align, and we can get a feel for where this needs to snap to. I'll go ahead and reduce the alpha again just to make sure we're matching it relatively closely. Turn on my wire on shaded, and then keep moving this. If you need to do that, remember you can click the arrow here, middle mouse button. That way you don't have to pull on the arrow there, and we can see that match up. Now, I'm noticing this doesn't quite seem to match up to that 15.5 setup on the door. So it looks like the measurements given here are just for the base without the door, which still works. You know, we're fitting it in there. So that should be fine for the bounds. Gives us an idea of how this should go. Now, just like with the other one, I'm going to move this out of the way, so that way I have it on the side there, but it's not interfering with my modeling view. And we can actually move these as far away as we want. So we can push those really far back. Just make sure you're pushing it behind the model. So that way, if you turn off the X-ray mode, your model sits on top. You don't want it in front of the model because that makes selecting hard. Okay, so we can name these. I'm just going to make this side IP for side image plane. We can come to this one and make this back_IP for back image plane. We can then shift select these, Control G to group them, name this image planes. And I like to give them a layer. So we'll go ahead and set up a layer over here. I'll double click this and just name this IPS for image planes and set this to a reference so we can't accidentally select those. And that is going to get us all set up. So now we have our block and mesh in place. We have our image planes in place. We're ready to start modeling. But before we do anything, we're going to want to save this. So we're going to File, Save Scene As, and we're going to place this into the correct folder here. So you can see I have characters, practice, props. We're going to go into props here. I'm going to create a new subfolder here, and we're going to go ahead and name this desk. And since we're going to do a lot of work on this desk, I'm going to create a new folder here and name this one modeling, and then save this into here as desk 001, or specifically desk modeling 001, and save. That way we're ready to go. While you're at it, you might want to go back and reorganize the jar to have a similar structure. I'm going to go ahead and do that, but there we go. So just a reminder on getting started. What is the first thing that we did? We set the units. So you want to make sure you set the units right away to match whatever unit you're going to be working in. For this particular project, we're working in inches. The next thing I do is I create a measure bound that has the dimensions of the overall block-in based on the schematics I'm working from. And then what I do after that is import the image plane. And to save time, I'll use IP as an acronym. And then we scale and place the image plane. And that's pretty much how we kick things off. So this is my standard approach to modeling any sort of object. I like to get this set up first because it allows the next stages to happen a little bit quicker. Okay, so let's go ahead and save once again. And as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and set up your own scene. So go ahead and set up a new scene, set your units to inches, create your bounds for your object, and set up your image plane so you can start working. So go ahead and get started with that, and then we'll start working our way into modeling this using some new techniques and some of the techniques we just learned previously. All right, so now that we have our image plane set and our bounds in place, we're ready to start modeling this. So let's just go ahead and review some of the best practices for modeling. The first thing is you want to model on 0, 0, 0. So you want to make sure it's smack dab in the center there, that little crosshair on the grid. That's going to be our 0, 0, 0 location. The reason why we want to do this is because it's going to make it so we can use mirroring. Mirroring is where you transport one object from one side of the axes to the exact opposite. You can do this forward, backwards, up or down, and we will be using that in this project. Now, a few other things that you want to make sure is that X is side to side. That's an important axis for mirroring, and Z, front and back, is going to be running down the middle. So you want to make sure that is set up. Now, some other things, general rules to follow. If it's a separate piece in real life, model it as a separate piece. If you remember with the jar, we made the lid separate from the body. We can always combine later and we can always separate later, but it tends to be a lot easier to combine than it does to separate in certain instances. So that's going to be something that you want to be aware of approaching this. So let's go ahead and get started. This object is going to be constructed a lot differently than the last one, and actually more similar to things we've already seen. I'm going to set my bounds to a template, and we're going to start by just analyzing the concept. Now, it's a little bit easier for me to show you this here in our pure ref, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. For those of you who have been blessed by building IKEA furniture, you're probably familiar with everything I'm about to say, so more power to you. But understanding how things are constructed in the real world can make your life a little bit easier. So when it comes to an object like this, you can see there's a bit of a bevel line here, indicating that these are separate little units, meaning that you can make one of these and you can essentially duplicate it to create the next few. What that means is there's a good chance that if we model this middle one, we could just duplicate it to either side to create the base for the cupboards. Other things to be aware of is things like the shelf here would be separate. There's a little back piece here that's separate. This should be separate here, but it doesn't quite look like it. And this is likely separate too. All right. So in short, we're going to have a lot of cubes here. We're going to have a lot of separate cubes. So let's get started. I'm going to start by building the side cubes, and I'll actually turn off the grid so I can see this a bit better. This is the grid icon here. We can toggle that off, and it can be a lot easier when we're working in a front view like this to have that turned off every now and then so we can see our concept more precisely. I'm also noticing my concept's actually not quite the right size, so I'm going to correct that real quick. This isn't a group for the image plane, so theoretically I should just be able to scale this, but I notice this corner aligns here, so I'm actually going to move this to this corner, and if I were to turn off my modeling bounds from a template, I could actually snap to vertex, which is another reason that's useful. I can actually scale this whole group just a little bit to fill that out, and that will give us a more accurate representation there. Okay. So let's set that back to template here. So let's go ahead and create a cube. I'm going to create polygon cube here. And with this cube, I'm just going to move it over here to be about at the midpoint and scale it down to where it is the correct thickness to match my concept. I'm then going to hit D and V to snap to vertex and X to snap to grid, just to place that. And then I'm going to go into vertex here. I'm going to right click into vertex mode, marquee select those top vertices. Remember, if you marquee select, it will select all of them. So that's the reason I'm clicking and dragging there. And then we can move this all the way up to be our first board here, like so. And then we can go ahead and get it looking right in the side view here. Now this one I actually can't see entirely. I do know, however, that it likely comes back maybe almost all the way here because there's probably a back plate that we would have. That would be about 1 inch thick. Usually they're very, very thin. So it's usually like plywood back there. And then we can bring this forward, and I know for a fact this one should run to where the cupboard begins. So right about there. And actually, now I think about it, I'm just going to take this all the way back because usually that plywood goes in between everything. So we'll just place that back here. And sometimes you have to just use your knowledge of how things are constructed as a 3D modeler. But there we go. We get our first base wall there for our object. Now from here, what I can do is I can duplicate this and I can move it across with mirroring to create the two sides. So how am I going to do that? Well, there's a really cool trick I like to use. The first thing we need to do is duplicate. We can do so by using Control D, which is going to duplicate, and we can mirror it. So if you remember the group mirroring, I think we used that back on the robot. We can Control G to group, and we can set that scale X to -1. And now you'll see that should be basically in the exact spot we need it to be. And if it's not, I'm going to say it should be there anyway. So there we go. Now, just to keep things kind of tidy, I am going to select that and hit Shift P to unparent. That way it is not in that parent group and we just have that object by itself. So let's go ahead and continue our construction here. I'm going to create a new cube here, create polygon cube. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and create the top part, which is going to be this top area here. And the reason why is we need the top area before we can get the sides. Now with this one, I can speed things up instead of using scale by using vertex snapping. So I'm going to hit D to snap my pivot, V to snap to vertex to be at the bottom. And then I'm going to hold V and drag down on Y here to snap to the top part here by just hovering over this. So that should be level there. I can then come into the top vertices, marquee select, move these down to be in line with my concept or my bounds box. In this case, I'm going to go with the bounds box. And then I can grab a side here and just use V to snap to vertex to get to the end there, V to snap to vertex to get to the end there. And now you'll see we have that spanning across the top. And the nice thing is since we're using vertex snapping, we know it's in the exact spot it needs to be. From here, I can navigate to my side view and I can pull this forward to the length it needs to be. Notice it does overshoot the cupboards a little bit here, or the sides rather, not the cupboards. And I can use V to snap to vertex to get it to the backside. So that way I have that nice little shelving unit there. Now, moving forward, we can use what we've already created to save a little bit of time here. We could duplicate this, Control D, and move this down to the shelf here. I can then use the vertices once again to snap to vertex. And this one's a little bit trickier. I have to grab it here and hover to this cross intersection. Do the same thing here, just marquee selecting all the vertices and snap to there. And then we can move these into place. So I'll just move this down a little bit. And that looks like it matches good. And that's going to fit in there perfectly, which isn't exactly what we want because we're going to want to have a backing on here. So I am going to come into the back side and move it in. And I'm also going to do the same with the front side because I don't want these to stick out all the way. So this is where I'm going to just kind of eyeball it. There's not really an exact dimension. I'm going to go into face mode here and just push this inward to where I feel it looks good for the shelf. And then do the same with the backing here. Just push this inward on Z till I find something that I feel looks good there. Coming to the front side, I can once again Control D to duplicate and bring this down. And this should be fine for the shelf size, so we don't need to adjust that. That should match up with the other one. We can then Control D this again, lots of Control D in here, and move this one down. But this time I'm going to scale it inward quite aggressively. I could even move it forward so we can see this. And just think of the thickness this front portion might be. It's probably not going to be that thick. It could, however, run all the way through, so I could be mistaken. You know, maybe we just want to leave it as is. But then we could go ahead and adjust the dimensions here so that it snaps here to the top portion and then snaps to the ground. A lot of the times these actually do have a little gap running underneath them, but I'm going to go ahead and set that down all the way because I don't know who likes their pen getting stuck under these. And then once I have that in place, we can just look at the recess here. And once again, we don't really have a feel for what this recess should look like per se. If I come in here to the front view or the side view, there's no cut in. So we just have to eyeball this till it looks about right. So we'll just go ahead and pull that back there. And usually these aren't too recessed in there. Just get something like that. Now, if you want to see things a bit better, we can toggle on our anti-aliasing up at the top here and our ambient occlusion. So when you're modeling, you know, quite often these things just look flat, like you can't really see the edge there. So anti-aliasing can clean things up a bit. If you experience some lag, turn it off. That's my advice. But the ambient occlusion here, this can be very useful. If you go ahead and turn that on, you'll see that we can see separations there a little bit better. So that can be useful. Now, the last thing this one needs is that backing. So I have to decide how I want to get it. Now, this is the right length for the backing. So I think I'll start with this. I'm just going to Control D to duplicate. And with this one, I can actually snap to vertex to the outer vertice. I'll hit D, V to snap to vertex to get to here. And as a matter of fact, if I wanted to middle mouse button to here, there'd be nothing wrong with that. And then we can just snap this here. From there, we can scale this across if we wanted to, or perhaps more appropriately scale it down to begin with, and start snapping these into the correct locations. So what do I mean by that? Well, this face can snap to these vertices to have a tighter look. So this bottom vertice here, if I turn on wire on shaded, we can get a better feel for it. So just these outside ones, and this is going to be very thin, but if I find something like this shelf, just hold down V and try and find a vertice to snap to. So over there is giving me a vertice. You can also just eyeball it for this. It doesn't have to be that precise. I can then select this one and V to snap to vertice over here, and that way we can snap to that side. And you'll see now we have this nice self-contained box, and this backside will be its own sort of thing. Now, quite often these are very thin, you know, just kind of flimsy backings. So we could scale that in, or rather than scale it in, just move this face in a little bit here. That way, it gives a little bit of ledge to the backside. Now, this is only needed if you're going to have this backside scene, but when you're building an asset like this, you have to think longevity. We might use this for something in the future, right? This is a very generic model, so having something like this is just fine. Now, there's one last little detail in here, which is this top ledge here. So I'm going to get that in here. I can use a shelf for this, just kind of Control D upwards. Once again, if I use D to snap to vertex and snap it to a top corner vertice, I can get this to match perfectly, and then just hold V to snap there. In the front view, I can bring this down the amount I need. Remember, we can access that X-ray mode up here to see through this. And a little bit hard to see there, but I can see the line. I'm going to pull this down to it, and then we can just push this back into here, and that is going to give us our first shelving unit. And just kind of approximate the depth we want. All right, so that is one little shelving unit down. What we can do now is grab all of these. We can delete the history and freeze the transforms, and we can go ahead and save. So I'm going to do a file, save scene as, and we have our desk modeling 01. I'm going to save this as desk modeling 02. So before I get too far ahead here, as a challenge, go ahead and model that central unit of your desk. Go ahead and give that a shot, and then when you get back, what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can't duplicate that to one of the sides, build out our cupboards, and then duplicate it to the other side. So give that a shot, and then we'll see if we can't reuse it. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue here. What I'm going to do is grab all of these and just hit Control-G to group them. And then I'm going to Control-D the group. With the group selected, I can move the pivot by hitting D and V to snap to this corner. And then I can just snap this entire group to that first selection. And you'll see now, just like that, it snaps into those bounds perfectly, and we have our two little shelving units. So what we're ready to do now is add in those cupboards, or at least the cupboard doors for now, which we can achieve once again using cubes. Now, unfortunately, we can't really just steal a cube to use for this. We could try something like the backing, but that's not really going to work, and we have two of these anyway, so we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to achieve this? We can also work smarter instead of harder, and do this on the middle section. So that sounds a little bit weird, but remember the middle section we have symmetry down. So if we get one door right, we can mirror it over. That might not necessarily matter, but sometimes it's good to look for those little shortcuts. Now to do this, I'm going to just take the image planes here and uncheck reference. I'm going to duplicate this and move it forward, Control-D, move forward. And then using the move tool, I'm just going to slide this to where this new one aligns with the original for the doors. So that way I can see their size, width, placement relative to the rest of it. It doesn't quite match perfectly, but that's okay. We can just force it to work for us. Now, from here, let's create a cube, polygon primitives cube. We can move this up and find the width of our door. A nice cheat we can do is if we hit D to move the pivot and V to snap to vertex, we can snap this to the corner of the cube. And then we can V to snap to the corner here, and we can scale that across to give us the midsection. So that is a way we can do this, and we'll have to be pretty precise there. Then we can go into vertices and just move this upwards, and this is going to go up until this area here, this lip. So you'll see the shape I'm getting. Following this, I can move my pivot to be on an inner corner, such as here, and come to the side view and just move this forward to snap so it matches the side edge here. It'll let me do that. For some reason, it doesn't want to let me. Maybe if I move it backwards, we'll have better luck. No? Okay. You can also eyeball it. You don't always have to snap, but I would prefer snapping. So let's try. There we go. It gave it to me there. So you just have to try it out. From there, I can scale it down to match the shelf, and you'll see that we have that door in place in the right size. So it should line up with that area. It overshoots a little bit, so you can grab it with your finger there. But there we have it. So that should be good. Is that floating? It doesn't quite look like it's in the spot I want it to be. So I need to move this to snap to that vertice. That way it's sitting inside of there. In which case, since it wasn't sitting inside of there, I need to scale it again to be the correct size to match the concept. And these aren't going to open for our scene, but if you did want to open them in a future scene, you could. But that will get that set up there. I can then Control-D, Control-G to scale, move that -1 in X, and those doors should be aligned nicely. and hopefully not overlapping. You can see they are, however, touching a little bit, which is unfortunate, or not touching a bit. We do want this to be perfectly symmetrical. So what are some solutions we can do for that? There's a couple of different solutions. One of the ones I already showed you is to get a line you can snap to using insert edge loops. So for example, I could take this edge here. We could go to mesh, insert edge loop here, set this to multi-edges in 3, and just click on this to get the midpoint of where this needs to snap. I could delete the duplicated door, come into the face mode here, and using V to snap to vertex, snap to where that aligns with that midsection, then Control D, Control G, scale X -1, and there you go. Now we don't need these edges here, so you can actually double click these and do an edit mesh, delete edge and vertex, but you can see how that can be useful for the purpose of mirroring. Now with these, I'm going to Shift P to get them out of that group just to get them a little bit cleaner. Freeze their transforms in the offset that I move them and don't want to. Go ahead and snap their pivot here by hitting D and V, and then just snapping over to here to place the door. And now we have our second shelf unit. Now, we know we can duplicate this and mirror this across, so that is not an issue. What we need to do next is going to be the handles, which is going to take maybe a couple different tools for us to achieve that. So we're going to explore that next. But first, what I want you to do is get the cupboards in place here. I know it was very simple, right? We just used 2 cubes. But there were a lot of steps to get this to match and be located in the correct location. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is go ahead and get those doors blocked in. Save your progress. So I can do a save as, save that progress out, and then rejoin me and we'll go ahead and try adding in these handles. Okay, so we're getting to the point where we can start to introduce some new tools. Now, in this first pass, surprisingly, we didn't use edge loops or extrusions, which gives you an idea that a lot of the stuff we were doing in the first portions of this course, just duplicating and placing things, is actually a large portion of modeling. But we're going to create something a bit complex here, which is going to be this handle. And this handle is going to require us to get this curved surface. There are a lot of ways we can approach this, but there is a way I like to approach it using a tool called the bevel tool. I'm going to create a new scene here. Make sure you save if you haven't, if you're going to follow along with this. And we're going to create a polygon primitive cube here, and we're going to explore a tool called the bevel tool. The bevel tool can be used in object mode to affect all of the surface's edges. It can be used in face mode to affect surrounding edges. It can be used in edge mode to affect selected edges, and it can be used in vertex mode to affect vertices. To begin with, let's take a look at what this does in object mode to something like a cube. If I select the cube in object mode and come up here to edit mesh and click bevel, what you will see is that it bevels the edges. Now, for those of you who may not have a background in manufacturing stuff or engineering or mechanical drafting, a bevel is basically where you cut an edge at an angle. Usually there's specific angles when it comes to things like engineering and manufacturing. I think it's like 45 or something like that, but I wouldn't say it's exact in Maya. Now you'll also notice this menu pops up, and this is how we control our bevel. If we turn on wire unshaded, we can see this a little bit better. So I'm going to click that so we can see it. And then utilizing this menu here, you'll see fraction allows us to control the tightness of a bevel. So we can make this tighter to an edge. Segments allows us to add segments. And this is a really important one because notice here that we have a triangle here, and you know that has issues with subdivision. So if we set the segment to 2, you'll notice that it turns that into quads. Very useful. Depth is an interesting one. If you play around with depth, it will actually push these in or out, and you'll see you can pair segments with different fractions to create very complex shapes. So something like this would be a nightmare to model by hand. You can see with this situation, we're utilizing a single tool. Depth can also go outward, so you can use it to round corners. I usually have it set to 0 unless I'm trying to create something specific, and usually don't use segments over 2. So just be aware of that. That will get that set up. Now we have a few different options as well here. So let's go ahead and just kind of go through these so you're aware of them. Let me increase the depth here. Mitering, you'll see is set to auto. You can also switch to uniform, patch, radial, or none. You'll see there is no effect here. that's going to deal with how this wireframe is created across complex surfaces. You can see that this mitering will also be an effect here. Not going to do anything on this example. So those would be an example for another time. I don't know if we'll get to that in this course, but you can read up on them in the Maya documentation. Now, the last one that's really useful here is chamfer. And chamfering is what you're seeing when you see that edge occur. So you'll see that we're getting that curve with the bevel. If you set a chamfer to off, it will actually just add edge loops. And you might recognize this from an earlier project. These are holding edges. So if I press 3, you'll see that it will actually allow us to smooth out cubes very quickly. And if I adjust the fraction here, you'll see that there we go. Now, let's go ahead and delete this and give another example. I don't want you to be under the impression that this by any means is a way to create holding edges for all objects. If we take something like a sphere, for example, here, and we apply a bevel to this, you'll see the end result gives us something a bit like a disco ball. So we get these tight edges here. And if I were to press 3 and turn off the wire on shaded, this would actually make it hold all the edges and give us, faceting. So with something like a rounded surface, you've got to be careful. You can't just bevel an object. So if you have something that's complex, it has rounds, it has straights, then you'll need to be more selective. Looking at this for other ways, you can utilize this by selecting a face, and you'll see if I do a bevel, it will bevel along that surface. You have all the same controls, so you can fraction this, you can change the segments, you can change the depth, so you can see how that can be used to create a lot of different shapes. Very useful. I'm going to undo that. You can use it on more than one face at a time, so we could shift to have 2 faces in bevel, and now we're getting something real wild. Don't know what all is going on there, but hey, look at that. That's a pretty cool little sci-fi piece, right? So we can create some really nice things there. So getting acquainted with this is good. It's going to allow you to have an idea of how to approach a lot of different things. You could see this could be used for like a shoulder pauldron or something on a character. It can also be used on edges. If I select this edge and we do a bevel and I add in segments, you can see we can get this nice rounded shape. Remember, we achieved this previously with smoothing with different edge loops, but this could be useful. Just be aware, though, this does give you n-gons. So right here, this is a big old n-gon, and we would need to resolve that. Are there tools we can do this with? Absolutely. I don't know if we're going to get to them in this section, but you can, okay? So we might explore that in a later section. You can also do more than one edge at a time. So let's say I wanted to do these 3 edges here, and I wanted to bevel all of these. We could bevel all of those, and you can see we can create all sorts of different shapes. Bevels can also be used as a means of splitting something. So for example, if I come in here to polygon primitives and I grab a torus, so for example, let's say we wanted to create something like a chain segment. This would be a great way to start because it has the rounds here and it has rounds here, but it has this issue where if I go ahead and pull out from here, we end up with this tapering on either side. So you can see we have a tapering there and we have a tapering here. So we end up with something that has a sort of rounding. Now after smoothing, that's probably not that noticeable, but let's say we wanted that to be straight. A way we could do that is using a bevel, and we could use it across these midsections here, across these edge loops. So when you use a bevel along an edge loop, what happens is it just splits it. And it splits it evenly in either direction. And you can add segments if you want to maintain roundness, but you can see how it splits that. Now I'm going to undo, because to create a chain segment, what I would want to do is double click here and do a edit mesh bevel. And now that side has a split and that side has a split. So now if I were to come in here to, let's say, the top view and try and figure out why the bevel's not where I put it. There it is. If I were to grab one side and move it, you'd see that we would get a straight side there. And we don't really need to worry about moving out one way or the other. We could just move out from one length to here and there. And now from here, if I were to duplicate this, rotate this 90 degrees, and just move it into place, we can start to create chain links. So you can see how the bevel can be used there to cut that across. Now, you can probably tell where I'm going with this based on our current project. If we come into our desk model here, we can utilize this to quickly build out the handles using the same technique. So I'll use the midsection here as sort of my base. I can increase the opacity here. So that way I can see that a little bit better. And I don't have the cupboards there, but that's okay. I can see them in the side view. And I'm going to create a polygon primitive, and we'll start with a torus here, aka donut. We can move this into the center. I'll go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. Remember, you can hold J to rotate in increments here. Move this over. And we can use T to kind of initialize this. Radius is going to be how big it is. What we're going to look for here is section radius to find the thickness. And then if I come into the side view here and we take a look at where this is located, which is back here somewhere, we can work on trying to get this to match here and pair this with X-ray mode to see through it. Hit T, and we could use radius and section radius to kind of find something that matches. And I'm going to move this so this center line here is flush to the cupboard. And we can just keep adjusting this till we get something close. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I think around there should be good. And remember, we can always move these forward or backwards as needed. In this case, I'll probably put it right about there. Now from here, that one's in place, but we're going to want to split this a bit. So in the side view here, I'm going to right click into face mode. And I'm just going to marquee select half of the donut and just delete it. That way we get a handle shape. You'll notice it doesn't quite match perfectly, but that's okay. We could go ahead and double click this edge here, shift double click this edge and extrude. In this case, I'll actually just hold shift to extrude straight forward. And then remember, we can V to snap to vertex. It's actually okay if we don't do that here, though. If they go a little bit into the cupboard, it's not going to hurt anything. But if you did want to have it perfectly onto the cupboard, you could. Sometimes it does help with texturing and lighting later on. Since this is a background element, I probably won't worry, but the modeler inside of me makes me have to worry. So I'm just going to hold V, snap to vertex to match that to the cupboard corner down here. And there you go. Now, to get this to split correctly, what I want to do is I want to use a bevel on that midsection, just like I demonstrated with the chain. I'm going to double click there, edit mesh bevel, and now we'll have a straight line on either side. And what I can do is I can grab the bottom vertices here past this point with a marquee select and just pull that down to match the handles placement. And just like that, we have a nice little handle for our object. Nice thing about this too is if you press the 3 button, it actually is already good to go for smoothing. Doesn't really need any adjustments. And yeah, the final thing to do is just place it on here. Now you'll notice I kept this in the center on purpose so we can mirror. So I'm going to Control D, Control G, and scale X -1. And then with these together, I can just move them across to match up with my other image. And at this point, I can actually delete this image plane. I don't need it anymore. Just make sure that these are sitting on the surface here. And it looks like they are. So that should be good. And that will get our handles placed onto our object here. The handles feel a little bit skinny. I feel I could have adjusted the radius to be a bit better, but that should be good. All right, so that is going to be the handle creation, and that's going to also be the bevel tool in a crash course. Now we'll be using the bevel tool again, likely to make it so this can smooth, but that will give us the base secondary form. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to try modeling the handles on your own. Go ahead and create the models for this and get those in place. All right, so go ahead and give that a shot. And then what we'll take a look at next is going to be prepping the model for subdivision and doing our final duplications to get this all set up. Okay, so we've made this model, but we have an issue where if I grab this and press 3, it doesn't quite smooth correctly. And we're going to want to get it to smooth to get those nice bevels so we have this beautiful looking object. Now, because this is built of cubes, we can cheat a little bit. And I should show you how to do this the hard way, but I think you learn. So, when you're playing around with the insert edge loop, I had you add holding edges to a cube, right? So what you might have saw is we can actually do that in an automated way with the bevel. And what's really cool with the bevel is we can make it consistent across our forms. So let me save real quick, and let's take a look at what that might look like. I'm going to select the top here, and we're going to come up here to Edit Mesh, and we're going to click Bevel. And I'm going to turn on Wire on Shaded so I can see the wireframe here. And we're going to make a couple different adjustments. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the chamfer to off. The reason why is I want to make sure this maintains those flush edges to the neighboring geometry. This will give us a nice subtle edge to things, but it won't give us a massive gap where things look cartoony or unrealistic or anything like that. So we're going to set that to off. And then I'm going to find a fraction that works. Right now, this is a bit round. So I'm going to set the fraction to maybe something like 0.2. And that looks good. If I press 3, that will smooth out nicely. And you'll see what this is going to do is it's going to give us that nice neighboring bevel. So we get a good result there. We might want to add some extra edges as we go, but that should do the trick. Now, what's really cool here is because these are all about the same size and dimension, we can reuse this fraction across these to speed things up. So for example, let's say I want to smooth this. I can come up here to Edit Mesh Bevel. I can turn on the wireframe. I could set the chamfer to off and the fraction to 0.2. And you'll see now that gives me a nice smoothing for this surface. Now, if we wanted to speed this up even more, when you come up here to something like Bevel, you can actually change the default settings inside of here by going to Edit Mesh Bevel and coming into the options. And we can actually set this so that the width is 0.2 and so that the other settings are what we need them to be as well. You'll see the chamfer is turned off. And if I hit apply, you'll see that will just apply that to that surface. Now notice it doesn't have a reset button. If you come in here to edit though, you can reset. But we don't want to do that. We actually just want to apply this across here. So with those set up, I can just apply here. And then I'm just going to press 3 once I've applied it so I can confirm it's done. Apply here. And I'm just going to go through and keep hitting apply. And with those set up, I don't even have to adjust the settings. It's just a quick fire the button, and it's going to make this cube able to smooth nicely, give us these nice clean bevels that will catch light the way we want. And you'll see that a little bit better once we get these all beveled. But that bevels that shape up real good. We can then apply it to this one, apply it to this one, apply it to the outside surface, apply it to the cupboards. We're not going to apply it to the handle. And that does all of those. Now, if you want to move these cupboards, you could do a modify freeze transform on these and just move them to the side. And then we could just come in here and apply it to that and apply it to the back side on the off chance we ever use those. And then lastly, back here. And that should bevel up all my sides for this object and give me what I want. Now, the stretching on these is pretty intense though. So on these side ones here, we're going to add in a couple edge loops. I think 4 should do, so I'll come into Insert Edge Loop here and just set this to a multi of 4. Remember, you have to check multi if you don't have it already. And I'm just going to come in and add these. This way, their textures don't get quite as stretched. And that should give us an okay look. And I'll do the same for the backside, especially if we're going to use anything like a cork texture or something back there. It'd be nice to have that. And I'm just going to reset this and close. And then on the bevel, I'm just going to edit, reset, and close. Okay. The front cupboards probably could use some subdivisions too, maybe not 4, but we'll go ahead and give them maybe 2 should be good. That's about even. We'll reset that again. And then just set these back to 0, 0. And that should be good to go. We can press 3 on everything. And if I go ahead and remove this and remove my bounding box, and even if I turned off anti-aliasing, you'll see now we're starting to get those cracks and crevices here, which if I were to press 1, do not show up because those are perfectly flat. This slight bevel here makes it so that we get that detail that we're looking for there, with those just slightly being in there. These bottom ones I feel like could have been a bit tighter. Maybe 0.1 wasn't the right amount for these. So I might take those and adjust them. You can actually adjust the history after the fact with the inputs here if you haven't deleted history yet. And I'll actually set that to 0.1 and smooth. And I might actually set that even lower, maybe 0.05. So that way we get a really aggressive smoothing on those. And I'll do the same thing here, 0.05. So that way we just get a nice little tight surface there. The handle should smooth fine, like I mentioned. So this is pretty much good to go. So the last thing we need to do is just mirror this over and clean the file up. And remember this guy back here. Oops. Let's go ahead and bevel that one. Apparently I forgot it. Sometimes it's better to do it manually because, doing it automatically with the bevel makes you not necessarily get to all of them. I'm also going to just check this one in here. Okay, that one's good. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and start the duplication. I'm going to come to this front side here. I want to marquee select this entire chunk, make sure I don't accidentally get the other one, and that looks good. I'm going to Control D to duplicate, Control G to group, and then scale X -1. That should put it on the other side, and that should line up perfectly with this one here, and that will finish up our cupboards. So you can see we didn't really do much here. We used a lot of cubes and bevels, and that's it. We used cubes, duplicate, and bevels. So pretty wild. But let's go ahead and clean this up. I'm just going to highlight these. I'm going to do a quick select hierarchy to get inside of all these and hit Shift-P to unparent. I'm then going to edit, delete all by type history to clear the history, freeze the transforms to freeze this up. If you have a lot of extra groups in here, you can do a file optimize scene size, and that will clear those out. And you'll see that we have all this extra junk left over. So we have a lot of naming to do, but we can deal with that. We also might want to do some combining. So this is kind of a lot for one section. So we're going to do that in the next section. So let's go ahead and pause here. And as a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to finish up your cupboard. So go ahead and get these prepped for smoothing, utilize that bevel tool. And then once you have that set up, go ahead and mirror these, and then we'll go ahead and do some final organization once you complete that. Also make sure you save. I'm going to save out another iteration here at 05. Okay, so we're ready for the final cleanup. If you didn't do so already, you can highlight everything, delete all by type history, freeze transform, that way it's locked in place, do a file, optimize scene size just to clear that out. And then after that, we're ready to start grouping and naming things. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight this in a group here. We'll go ahead and just get that in a group and hit Control G. So that way that one is grouped, and we'll go ahead and highlight this one over here, and we can go ahead and hit Control G. That way that one's grouped. And then, as you might have guessed, we'll go ahead and take the center one and do the same thing. This might be a little bit tricky. You want to make sure you get all of it in there. And it looks like we did, and make sure you're not getting any of the other groups. So Control G. Now, from here, we just have to decide how we want to name this, what we want to name this. This is like a shelving unit. I'm not too well versed with my interior design terms, so I'll leave it at that. But what we can do is we can go ahead and name this one Center Shelf. And then just coming down these, we can name this what they are. So we could save some time by doing a select hierarchy, doing a modify prefix hierarchy names. And if we prefix these, we could just prefix them center_shelf, hit OK, and name these. So I'll just make this center shelf. I'll just name it center, and we'll make that top. This is going to be center. Remember, we want to match up to the way we're facing. So this would be our left side. This one here would be our center shelf. This would be our center backing. This one here would be our center base. This one here would be our center base shelf. This one here is our, I guess I should call that backing. What did I call that? We'll make this our backing support, and then we'll make this our backing. So that's going to be our center backing. And then this one here is going to be our right side. And there we go. One of these has been named. So what we want to do now is we want to name the other ones. So just to kind of get us started, this one here is going to be the, this one's the center shelf. We're going to go ahead and make this one the left shelf. So let's go ahead and just make this left_shelf. And I'll do a select hierarchy, and we'll just do a modify prefix hierarchy names. And we'll just make this one left underscore and hit OK. That way, all these have left. You'll see that I accidentally left my shelf, so don't want to do that. And then over here, we can do a select hierarchy, modify prefix hierarchy names, and we'll just make this right underscore. And make this top one right shelf. And then we can go to town naming things. So let's go ahead and name these ones here. I'm going to try and match them up to the middle one. So I'm just going to name that top. We're going to go ahead and double click this one and name it top. And you'll see I'm kind of working from one side to the other. Unfortunately, this had left and right, which my brain just totally hates, but we'll go ahead and make this right side. This is going to be the right side. And you're probably wondering why this matters. It matters for programming and it matters for riggers. So when they get to this, it's not a complete mess. So that's the reason why we want to take time to do this, to name these. We're also going to be doing UVs on these, and ultimately we're probably going to get rid of a lot of this. We're just going to combine these down after we do UVs, but it's good practice to just name things. Do I do this professionally? I actually don't. If I don't have to, if I know I'm going to combine these, I really don't care. So I just kind of let it go. Probably not the best thing to confess here, but hey, it saves time. We're going to make this our left door. So our left door, and this will be our left right door. Do the same over here. This is going to be our right left door, and this is going to be our right door. And this is going to be our left handle. And this is going to be our right handle. And this will be our left handle. And this will be our right handle. And let's see what we're missing. We're missing whatever this thing is. I'm guessing that's the interior. So this is our backing support. And we can look for that on this one here. So well, that was a lucky guess. Backing support. And then we have our base. So this is our left base. Let me just make sure that's what I named that. Yeah, I did. Okay, this will be our right base. And this is going to be our left shelf. And then over here, we're going to have our right shelf somewhere. One of these two. Shelf, and then we named this one base shelf. And we'll name the other one base shelf. That is missing. There it is. And that should do the trick. All right, so a lot of work there in terms of naming. I think it was more work than modeling the darn thing, but there you have it. So we're good to go. I don't think we need to delete history or anything like that, but that's pretty much it. Now, the final things we want to do is just tidy up the scene in any other ways possible. For example, the bounds here, we don't need anymore. We can delete that. And the image planes, we actually don't need anymore either. We can delete those. Down here in the layers, we can right-click to delete layer, right-click to delete layer. And just in case there's any residual junk, doing a file optimize scene size is a good idea. You also see this front camera on my screen has kind of kicked up. That's due to the image plane. Basically, it means it's visible. If you hit Control H, you can hide that, and there we go. Now the scene's nice and clean. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to do a file save scene as, and we'll just go ahead and make this our desk model underscore final. So that way, when it comes time to texture this, we know which file to access. Okay, so that's going to be the final naming and cleanup for this particular asset. So go ahead and do that as a challenge. Clean up your scene, name all of the objects, and get it nice and clean and organized. So when you get to the texturing phase, future you thinks past you. Okay, so think of future you in this instance. So let's go ahead and wrap this up, and then we'll dive into a couple more models next to explore the various tools we've looked at and just different scenarios we might find ourselves in.